following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then, of course, the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary Sangiovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Border, Aaron Sweet, El Mahare and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method,
Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On,
It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Maybury,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbancic of Eight Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. Excelsior, true believers. Brian, I'm really happy today for a couple of reasons. The first is that we get to finish up this lunatic story, which is, not my favorite Defender's tale. Let's leave it at that. And we get to begin talking about the Foolkiller, which is a character that, I don't know why it works for me in this story, because it's so weird, but I really like it.
I've always loved the Foolkiller. I'm excited to talk about him, and I'm excited to bid farewell to Lunatic as well. Issue 72 begins, it says, continuing the senses-shattering saga of Lunatic. I can't wait for this senses-shattering saga to be over with.
Oh, it's shattering my senses, all right. I also want to point out that the cover of Defenders 72, which is what we're starting with today, as to follow up on what we were talking about last week, this came out when the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk series was on television and was a massive hit. So it has a banner on the front cover that says, starring the Hulk, Marvel's TV sensation.
Yep. And as I said, in future issues of the Defenders here for a while, even if Hulk isn't in the book, they find a way to put him on the cover.
Yes.
Because that was, we live in an era now where, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is just everywhere. But back then, all we had was the Hulk television show. We had an ill-fated Spider-Man attempt on television. There was a Captain America TV movie, a Doctor Strange TV movie, but the Hulk was the only one that really broke out.
Well, interestingly, though, the Hulk TV series broke out because it wasn't executed with cheese.
Right.
The thing is that the Spider-Man TV series with Nicholas Hammond, who was, I don't know if you probably do know this piece of trivia, was one of the Von Trapp kids in The Sound of Music. But that Spider-Man series was fun to watch when you were a kid, but I can't imagine an adult watching it and being able to, watch 10 minutes of it.
I tested it out on my 10-year-old, and he couldn't make it through 10 minutes of it.
Yeah.
He said it It was even cornier than Land of the Lost. He broke my heart with that.
Yeah, well, that's pretty corny. So the thing is that like all of that stuff was actually pretty weak, but the Hulk series, because it focused so much on Bill Bixby and sort of the wandering, the troubled sort of wandering, like almost like Kung Fu, the TV series with David Carradine, except he turned into a monster. For some reason, they were able to make it so that it was not completely cheesy. And so it became a hit, I think, because people could watch it who weren't kids,
Right.
But yeah, so that's why the Hulk is so prominent on the covers. And this one actually has that cover banner, which I thought was interesting.
Well, speaking of weak and corny, we begin issue 72, written by Ed Hannigan, drawn by Herb Trimpe. Fred Kita is the inker. And we open with Valkyrie, Nighthawk, the Hulk, Clea, and Doctor Strange and their new companions. We can blow through this really quick.
Yeah, these 2 issues we could. So basically, folks, they're in some place called Tunnelworld. And in Tunnelworld, all of the various shards of Professor Turk, who is also lunatic, the shards that we discussed last episode were splintered across a multitude of realities, have come together in this world, and they've become the army for some big bad that we will get to in a minute. So they become an army for this big bad. There's a sorcerer who serves the big bad. So they ride these giant bird creatures, and that's what's going on. So it's the Defenders are in Tunnelworld. Doctor Strange manages to co-opt the minds of some of these winged steeds, not winged steeds, but bird steeds, I guess. That's not the right term either. But anyway, the Defenders are able to mount them and fly them in pursuit of the abducted Hellcat, and Valkyrie is pursuing on Aragorn.
Right, and we get a multi-page battle of Valkyrie and Aragorn versus all the various incarnations of Lunatic. And it's a multi-page battle. That's all we need to say. And then Hulk drops from the sky and puts an end to it.
Yes.
He lands like an atom bomb in the middle of the lunatics. And
again, Brian, to me, the highlight of this is as usual, Hulk's dialogue. Clown faces are bothering Sword Girl. Bah, don't clown faces know better than to bother Hulk's friends? I mean, at a certain point, you have to figure you need to know better than to bother Hulk's friends.
And then Doctor Strange seems to make peace with the lunatics. He proposes that they team up, I guess?
I think we're giving away our level of disinterest in this story.
I can't follow the plot. I couldn't follow it when I was a kid and I read this. And I can't follow it as an adult. It's nonsensical.
Yeah. Well,
they team up to go fight the big bad.
I think, yeah. I think that somehow Doctor Strange is using the ones that are not Professor Turk. Anyway, we have a momentary cutaway for 6 panels on one page. We go back to the federal agents who are investigating Kyle Richmond. It just furthers that whole thing. It's a placeholder to remind us that that's still going on. They're not sure if Kyle Richmond is ducking the subpoena or if he's dead. So we know Kyle's going to come back to a mess when he does come back. Anyway, we get to the next page. I'm sorry I'm laughing. I just I hear the disinterest level in my own voice. We get to the next page. There's fight with Nighthawk. Thankfully, he's using near max maneuverability, he calls it, on his jetpack. I don't know, Brian. They fight a big monster. There's not a lot to be said.
They fight a big monster and it ends on a cliffhanger, and that brings us to issue 73, the end of the Lunatics.
Okay. All right. The issue 73. Sorry, I was already mentally jumping forward. Written by Hannigan. And again, I just want to take a moment here to say there's nothing wrong with Ed Hannigan as a writer, but he seems to be, at least up to this point, really attracted to these sort of dense stories that are much more about his ideas about fantasy worlds than they are about the characters.
Right, and I think also, he's kind of batting cleanup here for David Anthony Kraft,
right,
who had set up a lot of this stuff and then left the book.
But once again, we can go back to saying the lunatic story could have been ended the same way as the elf with a gun story, with a well-placed truck running over a lunatic. End of story. So we still have to say, I mean, he's done this 4-issue, exploration of lunatic, and I think back on the Asgard story where he teamed up with Kraft, but clearly now we see that similarly was probably Hannigan's influence of wanting to do this story that's about the big fantasy world and the battles and stuff like that, and to the detriment of the characters and their relationships, which are the things that we love about the Defenders.
Right.
Anyway, 73 is Ed Hannigan, Herb Trimpe on pencils, and Mike Esposito on inks. We open with a recap. No shock. We don't have to spend a lot of time on that.
Right. They're outside the stronghold of a master magician of Tunnelworld. His name is Zooks. And within the strong...
Wait a second. HX. So, Brian, Zooks is how you pronounce it, and I'm going with you on this one.
Okay. Yeah, and basically within that stronghold, they're going to find a way back to Earth and a solution to the dilemma of lunatic.
Now, this is interesting because initially when we got here, I had the impression that that this was the bad guy, but in actuality, Doctor Strange has come here because it's the stronghold of a sorcerer who is historically an ally of his. He's now establishing, right?
Right.
So that's why they're here.
Before they can get in, though, they're attacked by a bunch of monsters. They kind of remind me of the Nameless Ones. If anybody is a fan of Doctor Strange's solo comic, you've seen the Nameless Ones in the dimension of the Dread Dormammu. Imagine them with eyes all over their bodies
and fur.
And these creatures attack, and I think Hulk sums it up very well when he says, "Monsters hurting Hulk's friends? Bah, too many monsters in Tunnelworld. Hulk is sick of monsters." I would have added a word balloon. Hulk is sick of lunatic.
Yeah. Interestingly, I was going to note that at the end of the last issue, Hulk also says Hulk is sick of monsters. So yeah, Hulk. There is kind of a fun sequence of showing Hellcat's acrobatics. I mean, I think that's good. Let me take a moment to pause for station identification for another ad, please. There is a talk about locking this into its era. There is an ad done in comics form for Pete Rose batting practice.
Oh yeah.
So it just I don't want to go through the time to spend that, but just so it's a thing to help kids get better at batting, but in this it implies that Pete Rose is going to basically show up and and help you, which is weird. I don't know. The whole thing is weird. Anyway, that alone is more interesting than this comic. But in any case,
well, the Defenders, they finally go before the mighty wizard Zooks, and it turns out that he is also one of these furry, multi-eyed beings.
With a funky cap, though. He's got a funky cap, Ryan. I think you'd look great in that cap.
I think so too. And he's going to help the Defenders.
Wait. Let me just say that Zooks does have a almost Yoda-esque dialogue scheme. But I have to read this line. "Greetings, Doctor Strange and your companions, to this land. You welcome, I bid, Aru, Aru. And I was so disappointed that Doctor Strange doesn't reply with Aru, Aru. I'd go back and revise that myself. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, he puts all of the various incarnations of lunatic together on a platform, and the lunatics join in a chorus of the Beatles come together.
Yes, exactly. And it turns out that this was Professor Turk's plan all along, to have all the various shards of himself fused back together, and he becomes much more powerful. He is now Arisen Turk again, and now he's, basically takes on the Defenders. I think we can cut to the chase and say that the Defenders win.
They make it back to Earth.
Oh, wait a second. They win, and here's the interesting thing to me, though, Brian. They win, but they never find out who the big bad is. So you have 4-issue story, and there's a big bad in Tunnelworld, and we never learn the identity of that person.
I think we do later on, if I remember.
No, yeah,
correctly.
I think we do as well. Not that I care, but I think we do as well. But I just thought it was interesting that, it's here we go. We have these 4 issues, and I couldn't help wondering if they were getting mail saying, "Can you guys move on from this story?" Maybe
here we are. I skipped ahead in because I'm rereading these in Marvel's Essential Defenders Volume 4, issue 81. We have the original Defenders: Hulk, Doctor Strange, and Prince Namor, the Submariner, back in Tunnelworld, facing off against the unnameable Big Bad.
Oh well,
so,
dear listeners, you have that to look forward to. Excelsior. Anyway, they're back on Earth. They return to Staten Island, to Kyle's Richmond Riding Academy. Hulk goes off, and now I find really interesting, Brian, that essentially they're trying to make the Hulk here more like the TV show Hulk. He's always had this thing where he wanders off to be by himself in the wilderness or the forest. But I think that the emphasis on it becomes stronger here. Right. So we have, Hulk's friends. What does Hulk need with friends? Hulk never wanted to be a Defender, just wanted to be left alone. Why does Hulk stay with Defenders, and why does being alone hurt? Oh, poor Hulk.
It's a great scene. No,
it is a great scene.
Here Hannigan is on fire in those 3 panels with the Hulk. Yeah,
well, this is... But it is definitely a greater emphasis on that element, I think, and we're going to see more of that over the next few issues.
Right. We then end the issue back at Empire State University, and if you're groaning, saying, "But wait, Brian and Chris, that's where Ledge and Dollar Bill hang out," you're right, true believers. We end with Ledge and Dollar Bill in Professor Turk's room, and the door busts open, and a costumed figure with a gun says,
and a swashbuckling pirate hat.
Yeah, he says, "My mission here is one of utmost gravity. I seek lunatic, Professor Harrison Turk, for in the name of purity, balance, and aesthetic perfection, his blot must be eradicated." Excuse me. So decrees the Foolkiller.
Now, Brian, you'll know this, but first of all, I think that's a land speed record for us covering 2 issues of this comic. But
it is.
You'll know better than I. Is this the first appearance of this Foolkiller? There was another one, right?
Yeah. Excuse me 1 second here. Let me take a sip of coffee.
All right, that sounds like a good plan. While you do that, I'll say I love the cover to issue 74, which has the Foolkiller front and center. Although his costume is a different color on the front cover than it is in the comic, but
right.
But I am nevertheless a fan of that cover.
This is the first appearance of this Foolkiller.
Okay.
Marvel has had several Foolkillers created by Steve Gerber in his run on the Man-Thing in the early 70s. That Foolkiller died, and now we have this new Foolkiller.
Okay.
This one eventually dies in the 80s. Steve Gerber would do a 12-issue Foolkiller miniseries.
Gotcha.
And then I guess in the early aughts, they brought him back again with a new person under the costume.
Okay. Well, we've got, this is issue 74. Hannigan and Trimpe again, now inked by S. Mitchell,
Right.
whoever that is.
And the Foolkiller for because, I mean, we'll get to it here in this issue, but for those who are like, okay, well, what's the Foolkiller shtick? Imagine the Punisher, but instead of killing criminals, he kills fools.
Right.
You know, he kills the willfully ignorant.
Right. People he deems to be willfully ignorant. Yes.
Right. And I always liked the character.
Yeah. No, I like the character too, but I like the character because it is clear he is totally insane.
Right.
We should also point out that his gun is more of like a disintegration ray of some kind.
Yeah, it's not like Frank Castle, you know, gun him down with an AR-15. No, the Foolkiller disintegrates his victims.
Exactly. And I couldn't help hoping that in this scene, Dollar Bill would be disintegrated. But unfortunately, it is not to be, at least not at this point.
Right.
So, the Foolkiller has come to Empire State University. He's burst in on Ledge and Dollar Bill in the apartment of Dollar Bill and Professor Turk. And he's demanding to know where Professor Turk is. He's pissed off. He trashes some stuff. Ledge on crutches actually is the one who stands up to Foolkiller. And Foolkiller only gets more enraged. But essentially, what happens here, Brian, is that first we get a little bit of the Foolkiller's background.
Right. And what I find interesting about that, there's a flashback sequence in which he confronts a loan shark named Mr. Trodio, just to prove that the Marvel Universe is connected. That loan shark appeared throughout that era in the pages of Daredevil. He was just like this little, minor secondary character, kind of like what Frank Miller did in Daredevil with Turk later on.
Turk, who appears in the Netflix
that's right.
Defenders, actually in recent Jessica Jones and in Daredevil.
Yep.
In any case, so he gets this idea that initially he decided he was going to destroy all fools. Then he decides it would take forever to destroy all the fools in the world, and a bold new philosophy began to coalesce in his mind. I would discover who the biggest fools were and begin my crusade at the top. So that's how he ends up taking on this loan shark that you mentioned, Mr. Trocio, whatever the pronunciation is there.
Right.
Yeah. And then
we then cut to the Defenders, and after some girl time between Hellcat and Clea and Valkyrie, we see Kyle Richmond arrive. He's not in costume. He's not wearing his Nighthawk costume.
Yeah. Well, before you get to that point, I want to point out this one bit of dialogue that I love in that conversation with Patsy and Clea and Val, where they're talking about Doctor Strange, and Clea says, "Yes, Patsy, the mage is only human after all." And Valkyrie says, "I feel absolutely wicked enjoying such amusement at the expense of the weaker sex." And then all the ladies have a good laugh about the weaker sex. And then Hellcat says, "Speaking of which," and then Nighthawk or Kyle arrives.
Yeah. Basically, what it boils down to is Nighthawk's attorney has advised him he shouldn't be Nighthawk anymore, that he should just be Kyle Richmond, and that he should temporarily quit the Defenders.
Right, so that he can deal with all of his financial and legal problems. The scandal, if he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And then Clea is bummed. She says, because with all her mystical powers, she can do nothing to help. But she's only had a taste of what it means to be a defender. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. It means you're going to get shit on all the time. So Kyle basically says you guys can hang out at the Riding Academy, continue to use it as your headquarters, but I'm not going to be involved. And here you go, Brian. Here's the Hulk stuff you love. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, we get basically just, keep in mind, they've got to work the Hulk in because he's a big TV star now. We get a one-page segment where these two kids break into Kyle Richmond's stables, and they want to steal a horse and put it in some old lady's garden. The lady is named Mrs. Cradshaw. We never get to meet Mrs. Cradshaw. We never get to find out why these kids want to put the horse in her garden.
They're neighborhood punks.
Yeah, Hulk interrupts. Boys try to steal a horse, leave horse alone, or Hulk will smash. The boys run away. Hellcat catches them. And then we see Hulk hiding. Hellcat calls out to him, but he hides from her because he still wants to be left alone.
Yep, I thought that was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, we then cut to Atlantis, where Doctor Strange is visiting his old friend, Prince Namor the Submariner, and, he warns him about this unnameable big bad that they've encountered in Tunnelworld, and he wants Namor to help him. And, he wants Namor to rejoin the Defenders.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because every time Strange comes to see him, Namor's like, look, dude, I know you're only here because you need my help. I know we're not really friends. And yet he always eventually decides to help, even though he knows that, Strange is just really using him. I thought that was, interesting.
Right.
Then we encounter the thing that I find the most interesting about Foolkiller is that he's hanging out with these two sort of like ordinary people, Richard Rory and Amber. I don't know Amber's last name.
Right. Now, and we should fill in listeners. Richard Rory, he was a longtime Marvel character. He was akin to Rick Jones, although Marvel doesn't really use Rick Jones much anymore either. But he was one of these characters that he's a normal human being, no superpowers, and he would pop up as a supporting cast member in various books. Steve Gerber had used him extensively in Man-Thing. And then Steve Gerber began writing a comic called Omega the Unknown. And both Richard and Amber became characters in Omega the Unknown. Now, what's curious here, since we saw Foolkiller in the last issue of Defenders, it's crossed over with Omega issues 8 through 10. What happens in those issues doesn't really impact anything here as far as our storyline goes. But that's where Richard and Amber have come from. They've encountered Foolkiller over in the pages of Omega the Unknown. So Foolkiller was all over the place that month in Marvel.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that they're going to wrap up, Marvel promised that they would wrap up Omega the Unknown in Defenders, and they haven't done it yet.
Right, because Omega the Unknown had unfortunately been canceled early on. Issue number 10 was the last issue, and it ended with a cliffhanger. So, I guess the 2,000 people that were actually reading the comic kept demanding, well, when are we going to get a resolution? And they kept saying, oh, we're going to wrap it up in the pages of the Defenders, but they haven't.
Right. So the introduction of Richard and Amber here is going to lead us back to Omega.
Right.
I don't know. I have to say, Brian, I never read Omega the Unknown. I know I read the character, I'm sure, in Defenders. I may have read an issue or two of the series, but hopefully when we get to it, which will be soon, I'll read up a little bit about it so we can explain what's going on.
It's fantastic. Marvel collected them all in one volume. It's one of Steve Gerber's lesser known works. Basically, it's his take on Shazam. The DC character Billy Batson. He's a kid who he says this magic word and he turns into a ripoff of Superman. Basically, Omega the Unknown was that, but with aliens and you remember the Lubderdites?
Oh no! Yes, I remember. From the Defenders Rogues Gallery, they're involved.
It's definitely worth seeking out, and I think maybe we should, when we get to the Omega crossover here, we should at least recap, real quickly the Omega saga.
Yeah, a little bit anyway. All right, so basically, the thing I was saying is that they're on a train, and it's Dollar Bill and Ledge and the Foolkiller and Richard and Amber. And what I find so fascinating is that Richard and Amber are just kind of hanging out with the Foolkiller, even though his stated purpose is to murder people. They're just like chilling out. Now, Dollar Bill and Ledge, it will turn out, have a hidden agenda here in taking the Foolkiller out to Staten Island.
Well, Richard,
let me just say, what they've promised is they're going to introduce the Foolkiller so that in hopes that he will become one of the Defenders, and he's going along with that.
Right.
But Richard and Amber are hanging out with the guy, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm a murderer. That's my plan."
Well, Richard is sort of this morally gray character. I mean, his very first appearance, he watches the Man-Thing murder a bunch of Hell's Angels that were after him, and he doesn't blink twice. He always ends up hanging out with these morally gray Marvel characters. He's sort of the anti-hero version of Rick Jones, I suppose.
Right.
Or Jim Wilson from the Hulk's book.
Yeah. Interesting. So we have a little bit more about that. We have a conversation about the Foolkiller's philosophy, and then once again we have the thread going on where what's happening with the Hulk, because he keeps trying to find a place to be alone, but in this case he's sitting on the train tracks.
Right.
So the conductor has to stop the train abruptly, and we see a moment of the Foolkiller's insanity reveal itself.
The train screeches to a halt, throwing everyone from their seats, and the Foolkiller brandishes his weapon and says, "This railroad is being run by fools who shall pay with their lives." He's intent on killing the engineer.
Oh, yeah, he's clearly snapped. I mean, his face in the art is like he's snarling basically with crazy eyes. So he's off his nut because the train came to an abrupt stop. Then he finds out that it's the Hulk outside. Actually, he doesn't find out right now because
well, Hulk has had enough, and we get 2 pages of Hulk beating up a train. And he smashes the train. He smashes all the cars. He rips the railroad ties up from the ground, smashes those. And what do the people on the train do? They applaud. These are commuters. If you live in a metropolitan area and you commute every day, you're one of these people. They applaud Hulk for doing what they've wished they could do for years.
And of course, that just makes Hulk so confused. He says, "Puny ones are not only stupid, but crazy too." So he's taking off because humans are crazy. So we get back to the Riding Academy, where Valkyrie, Hellcat, and Clea are gathered in a room that looks suspiciously like the conference room in Avengers Mansion.
Yes.
And Dollar Bill and Ledge show up with Foolkiller and Richard and Amber, and they're talking about letting the Foolkiller join. They don't know anything about him.
Right. And we should point out, Valkyrie has finally had enough of Dollar Bill's bullshit.
Yes.
He comes in, "Hey, gang, it's me, Dollar Bill." And Valkyrie says, "I hope you have a good reason for bothering us, Bill." And he says, "Hey, Val, cool it. That's not you. You sound like old Nighthawk."
I like your Dollar Bill. I think you should do, when he appears in the animated series of some Marvel animated series, you should do the voice.
Here we go. Jeff Loeb, if you're listening, I want to voice Dollar Bill.
Anyway.
Oh, by the way,
yeah.
Speaking of Marvel characters, on last week's episode, we had talked about having Kurt Busiek on the show.
Yes.
I talked to him this week, and unfortunately, he's got some health things and some deadlines that prevent him from appearing. But I did find out that he does listen to the show.
Oh, good.
So hello to Kurt.
Hello to Kurt. Well, Kurt, yeah. If you ever have a moment in your schedule and you're feeling up to it, we'd love to have you come on and do dramatic readings of your letters to the Defenders dialogue page in the 1970s.
So yeah, the Dollar Bill introduces Foolkiller, and they're talking, and he notices Dragon Fang, Valkyrie's sword, And he asks if it has served her well, and she says yes, but I must take care at all times to use the flat of my blade so as not to slay evildoers. And Foolkiller snaps, not slay them? Why, that sounds foolish. And he decides that the defenders are indeed fools, and therefore...
Well, actually, what he's saying is, he says, what else should I expect from fools? I knew about you all along, defenders. Indeed, it has long been a desire of mine to destroy you, and don't think I won't.
That's right.
Dun, dun. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate, which you have the essentials. I'm taking a moment to appreciate the back cover ad on issue 74 of Defenders, Brian. A 23rd Century Odyssey Now, Star Trek, the motion picture.
Wow.
Which I was so happy to see this. Now, my eldest son, Nick, and I have a big disagreement because he loves Star Trek, the motion picture, and I think it's awful. I love Star Trek 2 and 3, but the Star Trek, the motion picture, I think is incredibly boring, but he loves it. But it was still nice to see that ad because it had flashed me back to, I believe, at this point, 1979. So yeah, that was a nice moment. Now, the cover of 75, Brian, one of my all-time favorite Defenders covers.
Nighthawk has had enough.
It's a big spoiler on the cover because in the background, so it's Nighthawk with his arms raised in fury, shouting, "And don't come back. This is the end of the Defenders."
And we see Richmond Riding Academy in flames.
Yes.
And a tearful Valkyrie, a sullen-looking Hellcat, and an ashamed-looking Hulk walking away.
Yeah. Walking away from Nighthawk, who's basically throwing them out. So, spoilers, things don't go well in this issue. We have Hannigan, Trippy, and Esposito again. Interesting because so rarely in those days do we have inkers being carried over, at least on this book, because everybody was just sort of picking up the work at the moment that they could get it. It seemed to me,
right.
You know, the pencils would come in and they would assign whoever was available to ink them. But in this case, we have Esposito, who I think does a great job, actually. So
we have Foolkiller has shot Dragon Fang out of Valkyrie's hand. He then takes Dollar Bill hostage. I hope that he will shoot Dollar Bill in the head, but he does not. Richard Rory is trying to talk him down, but he's not listening. He forces everybody into the next room. Now, I gotta say, I got a big problem here with what Ed Hannigan does with the writing.
Okay.
He has Valkyrie whisper, "Clay, don't do anything. Dollar Bill's life is at stake." And Clay thinks to herself, "I could stop Foolkiller with a simple spell, I'm sure of it. But Val is the leader now that Nighthawk has quit the Defenders. I must follow her judgment." Horseshit.
Right. Well, it's really lazy.
It really, I mean, okay, yeah, look. If Clay stops Foolkiller, then, what are they going to do for the other 22 pages of the comic book?
Right.
But it's just lazy fucking writing.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's sort of like, oh, I forgot she was in this issue. And so then it's like, it reads to me like the editor, who was at the time, let's see, it was edited by Al Milgrom. It reads to me like Al Milgrom said, "Hey, Ed, remember Clea's a sorceress?" And so he had to put in this like dialogue and thought balloons to explain why she's not doing anything. So that's interesting. By the way, I also want to point out that thanks to Greg and Amber, what's his name, Richard and Amber being there, we get the consistent usage of Foolkiller's actual name, which is Greg.
That's right.
He's just a dude named Greg with a disintegration gun.
That's right. We then find out, for me, the best part of the issue, we find out that the reason Foolkiller is in the Defenders' lives it's Dollar Bill, but it's not because Dollar Bill invited him to be a defender. It goes all the way back to that goddamn documentary that Dollar Bill made. Remember the Defender for a Day saga?
Yep.
But it turns out Foolkiller watched that, and from that documentary decreed that the Defenders were the biggest fools on earth.
Exactly. So Dollar Bill's marketing expertise leaves something to be desired.
Yeah. Valkyrie makes a play. She tries to take down Foolkiller, but he shoots her. But I guess because she's Asgardian or because she's armored, the disintegration ray, it doesn't disintegrate her, but it does knock her out.
Yeah, it stuns her, knocks her out. Clea says, "Stay back, Hellcat. I'll defeat him with a mystic gesture." But
because it's always good to announce to the villain what you're going to do.
We won't even go into the politics of that.
Yeah. So Foolkiller shoots the roof and brings the entire Riding Academy crashing down on them.
Yeah. By the way, we should say he calls his gun his Purifier Ray.
Right.
Which, I guess if you've been disintegrated, you've been purified in some way. Yes, he brings the roof down. Although Valkyrie with her Asgardian strength manages to catch a big piece of the roof to keep it from crushing herself and her friends. And Dollar Bill actually claims responsibility. He apologizes and said it's all his fault. And Ledge, uncharacteristically also, forgives him. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's Richard who forgives him. I'm sorry. Ledge probably was going to smash him.
Ledge's in another part of the mansion, and he has done the one smart thing that any of these characters have done this issue. He dials 911 and calls the police.
Yeah, he's the one person who has the smarts to call in people who aren't fools, apparently. Oh, man. Yeah, so we cut to Kyle Richmond and his lawyer or accountant or whoever in the back of Kyle's limo, and he pulls up. He hears that he gets a call on the phone in his limo, and is told that the Defenders need him because there's a problem at the Riding Academy. So he breaks the rules. The government has told him no more night hawking.
Right.
And he puts on his costume and he flies back to the Riding Academy.
Right, where Hellcat is facing off one-on-one against the Foolkiller. Now, as I've said, I don't really become a Hellcat fan until J.M. DeMatteis begins his legendary run on this book. But I have to admit, this was my favorite part, other than what's coming up with the Hulk. This was my favorite part of this issue.
Yes.
Because her dialogue is still crap, but she holds her own against the Foolkiller, distracts him long enough for everybody to make it out of the house, and then Valkyrie joins the fray and knocks him out.
Yeah, well, and then the other characters are all running out of the house, which is now on fire because of the fight that went on there. And we have Amber say, "We got out just in time. The place is going up in flames. I'll say this much about your friend, Rich," meaning Foolkiller. "He's not boring." So you can say whatever you want about Richard's gray area, but Amber is also just kind of like, yeah, well, this guy just tried to kill us all. He's a murderer. But, at least he's not boring.
Meanwhile, on a deserted beach on Long Island, Hulk has finally found a place where there are no puny humans, a place where Hulk can be alone and think.
Yeah, this is a great scene.
Yeah. But his solitude is shattered by a big fish, a whale, which has beached itself. And Hulk doesn't understand. Why does whale stay on beach? Whale should be in water where he belongs.
Yeah, get back in the water, whale. Hulk wants to be alone. Oh, that was great.
So he's hollering at the whale, and then he sees his reflection in the whale's eyes and feels bad. And Hulk apologizes to the whale.
He feels bad because he sees his reflection because he's yelling at the whale. And then he sees his reflection and he says, "What is that angry face Hulk sees?" It is Hulk's face. Hulk yelling at whale when whale is too weak to yell back. Hulk is sorry, Whale, for acting like stupid human.
And then Hulk grabs the whale by the tail and puts him back in the water, and the whale waves goodbye by shooting some water out of his blowhole, and Whale says goodbye to Hulk. Hulk is glad he helped Whale go back to his friends. Now Hulk knows that he wants to go back to friends too.
And I have to say, what this reminds me of more than anything is the classic children's picture book, Are You My Mother? And if you're not familiar with Are You My Mother, shame on you. But you know what I'm saying, right, Brian?
I know what you're saying.
Anyway, continue.
So yes, back at Richmond Riding Academy, they've made short work of Foolkiller. Clea is trying to use magic to stop the destruction of Kyle's house. But fire is a primal force and not easily tamed. We then get a double-page spread. Nighthawk arriving and seeing his house on fire and seeing fire trucks and superheroes.
Yeah, and ambulances and police cars, and things are not going well.
No.
As they're all, but important things like Hellcat has a thought balloon where she thinks, geez, I'm really lucky. My shadow cloak wasn't even singed.
And then we get this fantastic interplay between Valkyrie and Nighthawk. He asks Valkyrie, what the hell has happened? And Valkyrie says, it was a costume madman, Kyle. He called himself Foolkiller. And Nighthawk says, he must have been a tough one to do all this. What were his powers? No powers. He just had a gun. And Nighthawk says, a gun? A madman with a gun? And you let him destroy Defender's headquarters?
Yeah, so he's a little pissed. Then the reporters start trying to question him. And he announces, as of now, there is no Defenders. The Defenders is hereby dissolved. The whole thing was one long nightmare, according to him. And He flies off.
At which point, the Hulk arrives. Now, Hulk sees first responders, firemen, paramedics, but also police. And police have guns. And Hulk assumes that the men with guns are hounding Hulk's friends. And Hulk will smash all the men with guns. He then starts going after the first responders.
Yes, which is not a good look. Now, before we wrap up this issue, Brian, a shout out to one of our favorite forgotten characters from this era, because on the Bullpen Bulletins page, there's an image of the new costume of Bill Foster, once known as Black Goliath, but now announced on the Bullpen Bulletins page with the new costume, the new Giant Man.
That's right.
I loved Bill Foster and the character, whether he was Black Goliath or Giant Man, and he had his own series. And I don't know if you came across this piece of news, but it's my understanding that in the upcoming Ant-Man and the Wasp,
we get Bill Foster.
Lawrence Fishburne is Bill Foster.
Yep. Which, awesome for that. And hopefully that means that Marvel Comics will bring the character back to life.
That would be great.
In the comics, of course, he was killed during Civil War.
Civil War, exactly. So,
yep.
So hopefully we will see him again because of that.
And hopefully we will see the Defenders again, because it ends on a grim note. The media tells the Hulk that there are no more Defenders, and Hulk turns to Valkyrie and says, "We're all leaving this place." And Hulk says, "No more Defenders at Birdnose's house. Where will Defenders go?" And Valkyrie tells him, "Well, for right now, we're not certain there are going to be any more Defenders." So Hulk decides he will leave for good this time. And basically, the Defenders at this point are Valkyrie, Hellcat, Clea, and Dollar Bill. That's it. Nighthawk's gone. Hulk is gone. Doctor Strange is off with Namor. They may indeed be the Defenders no more, which is unfortunate, because we then find out that in the Las Vegas City morgue, there's a cadaver, and that cadaver is the man that was known as Omega the Unknown, who we mentioned.
Yeah, so Richard is asking Valkyrie and Hellcat for their help in dealing with Omega the Unknown, and that leads us into the first part of the searing conclusion to the Omega Saga, which starts next issue in issue 76, and also issue 76, Brian, will mark the halfway point in our recap of the Defenders.
That's right.
It goes to issue 152. We're actually a little bit more than halfway already because we also did the giant sizes, but who's quibbling?
I'm looking here. I'm flipping ahead to next issue, issue 76. They do recap the Omega Saga, but I don't think they do it justice.
Okay.
So I may reread that and just offer a quick 5-minute synopsis on next week's show.
Sounds good.
But I'm very excited because next week we do see the return of one of my favorite Defenders villains, and that is Ruby of the Headmen.
Excellent. Listen, I think Ruby was as stupid as our friend Tom Stagowski thinks she is. Ruby is actually my favorite character from the Headmen.
That's right. One other thing we should point out: 75 is Ed Hennigan's last issue. Next week's show, Stephen Grant takes over as the writer. So we'll see how he does.
Well, cool. Well, we'll let's just say Ed Hannigan went on a high note because I thought 74 and 75 were his best issues.
I agree. Speaking of high notes, I want to remind people the guy that makes us sound good every week, because we record this on Skype, just like Chris's show, Three Guys with Beards, is recorded. But I know listeners of my show, The Horror Show with Brian Keene, they say, well, how come Defenders Dialogue sounds so much better than Three Guys with Beards? Well, first of all, it's because we don't have James Moore on with us. But second of all, it's our engineer, Tommy Clark, and he has a podcast as well. It's called the Necrocasticon. It is available to listen wherever you listen to Defenders Dialogue: Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and of course, all of our podcasts are brought to you by the Project Entertainment Network. Chris, if I may, I would like to point people toward the Project Entertainment Network's YouTube page. And the reason for that, in 2 weeks, over on my podcast, we are going to be doing our second annual live telethon. That is where we stay awake for 24 hours and we live stream it out via the internet. And we raise money for the Scares That Care 501c charity. Basically, we're going to raise $20,000 for kids with cancer. And that is going to be live streamed for free on the Project Entertainment Network's YouTube page. So if you have a moment, go find their YouTube page and subscribe. And then once that live stream goes up, you'll be able to listen along.
Great. And you can listen along at any point while Brian and Dave and company get more and more exhausted because we're all old now.
For folks who listened to last year's telethon, halfway through, I started coughing up blood because, I'm old and I should not be talking for 24 hours straight. But we made it through. We raised $10,000 last year, which was our goal. So this year we're going for $20,000. We're going to have a lot of guests. We're going to have Jeff Strand and Lynn Hansen there. Rock band Discipline Theory is going to do a live set. Scott Edelman from Defenders Dialogue fame will be on hand. All kinds of stuff going on. So we hope folks will tune in.
That's great.
And
Well,
to do
I hope
that, just subscribe to the Project Entertainment Network's YouTube channel.
Excellent. I hope all those people there give your voice a chance to rest.
Oh, they will.
Good.
They will.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, send us home, Chris.
Excelsior, true believers!
You do
That one
well.
was for Kurt Busiek.
See you next week, folks.
Armcast, Dead Sexy Podcasts. I'm your host, Armand Rosamilia. Fridays exclusively on Project Entertainment Network, where I interview authors, publishers, editors, artists, filmmakers, narrators, the lady from Walmart, whoever I feel like talking to. That's every Friday, Armcast, right here on Project Entertainment Network.
Three guys with beards.
The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink stains, Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method.
Monster Attack.
Necrocastic.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club podcast.
Pizza.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.